Hello everybody, welcome to another episode of Fun with Maps. I'm your host Dan Hanson. I think this episode might clear up some confusion, at least it did for me. You know, Queen Elizabeth II recently passed away, and there's been so much coverage in the news of her funeral and the next steps in Great Britain and England and all that, and it led to some confusing terms. I mean, she was around since 1952, so a 70-year reign, and there's a lot of confusion. You heard terms thrown about that maybe people didn't understand exactly what they were. Like, what's the difference? Is she the Queen of England? Is she the Queen of the United Kingdom? Great Britain? Britain? You know, just exactly what are some of these terms? So here we got, you can see Great Britain. This is the map of Europe, and here's Great Britain, here's Ireland, okay? Great Britain is this island, okay? It's in the North Atlantic there, just off of Europe, France, Belgium, Netherlands, all that, right? It's got an area of about 80,000 square miles, so it's the largest of the British Isles, which we'll cover that term in a minute, British Isles. It's the largest European island, and it's the 9th largest island in the world. So this is Great Britain. So this over here is Ireland, and that's an island also, of course, and it's about 60% of the size of Great Britain, okay? So the British island, part of an archipelago, and remember, an archipelago is just a group of islands that are all clustered together in a sea here. So the British Islands archipelago consists of this big island of Great Britain, Ireland in the archipelago, not politically, and over 1,000 smaller islands and named substantial rocks there. So, you know, the Shetland Islands and Orkney Islands, things like that. So these are all the British Islands, okay? So the archipelago has been named the British Islands for, you know, a couple thousand years, and the term derives from terms used by classical geographers to describe the whole island group. What you don't see here, you just see one island here. But in reality, we know that up here is Scotland. Over here to the west is Wales. And this area in here is England. So what's the story? I mean, are these three countries? Are they separate countries? Are they part of England? What is it? That's what we're going to cover today. So now you can see, and we'll see it closer when we get to the computer, how close it is to France here. There was a land bridge there called Doggerland, and you could actually walk across, take your carts across. You know, there's been humans here in Great Britain, in the British Isles, for about 30,000 years, okay? So you can see over time, Ireland was probably fitting there, and Great Britain probably fitting here, and as things shifted, and here they were probably connected all together. So this Great Britain, the island we're looking at today, it's got a population of about 63 million people, which makes it the third most populous island in the world after Java in Indonesia and Honshu in Japan. So that's England, Scotland, and Wales. But what's the United Kingdom? So this is where the confusion is. The United Kingdom is a sovereign country in Europe. It includes England, Wales, Scotland, Northern Ireland, and many smaller islands within the British Isles. So in this episode of Fun with Maps, we're going to look at the island of Great Britain, concentrating on Scotland, Wales, and England, and just the basics. I mean, you could do any of those maps and spend dozens of hours and all, but today we're just going to look at the map of Great Britain, which includes Scotland, Wales, and England. Okay, here's a CIA map of basically Europe and part of Asia and all that, but you can see here, this is Great Britain, this island here, England, Wales, Scotland. They also include, they're showing the United Kingdom, some of Northern Ireland here. what's interesting is look how close Great Britain is from the European mainland. Okay, so you got the North Sea here and the English Channel. And here's France, of course. That narrows down to about 18 nautical miles, 21 miles at the Straits of Dover here. So look how close that is. So this is a nice drawing map by someone named Wayun Mortadello, 2005. And you can see here's England, here's Dover, Folkestone, here's France, here's Calais, and this is the route of the Channel Tunnel. Since 1993, England here has been joined to France, continental Europe, with the Channel Tunnel, also known as the Channel. It's the longest undersea rail tunnel in the world. It's 31.3 miles railway tunnel, and it connects this Folkestone, which is in Kent in England, with Coquel in France, and it goes under the English Channel here at the Strait of Dover. Okay, there's Dover. It's the only fixed link between the island of Great Britain and the European mainland. So here's a fun with maps fact. At its lowest point, it's 250 feet deep below the seabed and 380 feet below sea level. So at 23.5 miles, it's the longest underwater section of any tunnel in the world and the third longest railway tunnel in the world. So, and the speed limit for trains, it's 100 miles per hour for trains going through the tunnel. So on the other side, we can see how close Great Britain is to Ireland. So here's the North Channel, right? It's the Isle of Man, Scotland, England, Northern Ireland, all that. So Great Britain is separated from Ireland on its west by the North Channel, the Irish Sea, St. George's Channel, and the Celtic Sea. Okay? So the closest distance from Ireland to Scotland, well, as the Scottish would say, it's the wee stretch of water between the Mull of Kintyre and the North Antrim coast in Ireland. And it's just 12 miles. Okay? So this is the Mull of Kintyre here. Just 12 miles. But don't expect a bridge to be built there. Don't expect to just hop in a boat and go 12 miles across. It's very treacherous waters there, not easily navigable. So this is the Mull of Kintyre. It's the southwesternmost tip of the Kintyre Peninsula in southwest Scotland here. So mull is just a geographic term that the Scots use mostly in the southwest of Scotland, where they apply to the headlands. So here in Cleveland, instead of calling it Mentor Headlands, we could call it we could talk about the Mull of Mentor, for example. I don't think that'll catch on, but so here's the fun with map facts. If you're in the Mull of Kintyre here and it's a calm and clear day, you can see the Antrim coast of Northern Ireland. So it's 12 miles away and you can see it clearly. There's a famous lighthouse here, and you may remember in 1977 Paul McCartney was playing with Wings at the time. They had hit with the song Mull of Kintyre, and Paul was living there at the time in Kintyre, Mull of Kintyre. It's a great song, actually. You should check it out. So now we know where Great Britain is in relationship to mainland Europe and to Ireland. So let's take a brief look at the history, starting with some maps by Ptolemy. You remember Ptolemy, right? He was an ancient Macedonian Greek mathematician, astronomer, geographer, and more. He's really ahead of his time. You have Ptolemy's 2nd century map of what was then Roman Britain. And it's one of the earliest surviving copies of that map, what they call the British Isles. And he published this in his Geographia. So here you can see, here's France and Europe. Here's the Oceanus Germanicus here. Hibernia, which is Ireland. Oceanus Occidentalis, so that's just the Western Ocean. Britannica, as you'll see, it becomes Britain. Okay, and what's a lot of the islands here. It's got the Isle of Man and various things. But look how Scotland, which they called Caledonia back then, it's off to the east here instead of the north. It should be up here, and it's over here. Okay, but for Ptolemy's time, this is pretty impressive. So this is a NASA photo of Ireland and Great Britain in 2012. So you can see in reality, Scotland up here is to the north. It's not over here like Ptolemy drew it. Okay, you can also see from this map how close the Mulligatire is here to Northern Ireland. You can also see how close the English Channel here, France, to here's the White Cliffs of Dover right there, how close that is and how close that is. So obviously millions of years or whenever ago, this was all connected, as was the British Isles to Northern Europe. Another great map. This is a map of the British Isles and Oceanus Germanicus, which translates to the North Sea. Okay, that's here, Oceanus Germanicus, and it's a 1490 Italian reconstruction of maps of Ptolemy, but it's got some of the roads and other features from the 1st century of Roman occupation. So once again, though, based on what Ptolemy had, it's got 2 big faults. You know, here's it's got a lot of great stuff, Isle of Man and Hibernia, Ireland, but it's got Scotland off to the east here, and that's Scotland doesn't project to the east, it's up here. And the other thing is, it's got Ireland should be more at the same latitude of Wales, and it's got them way up here. So not bad for 1490 based on something that Ptolemy did in the 2nd century, but that's an impressive map. So Great Britain was probably first inhabited by people across the land bridge from the European mainland. You know, they're so close to France. They found human footprints over 800,000 years ago in Norfolk. So, and then until about 16,000 years ago, scientists say it was Great Britain was connected to Ireland by an ice bridge, and before 9,000 years ago, there was a land connection to the continent here. Okay, and then there was marshlands, and they actually joined up with Denmark and the Netherlands. So all this stuff was connected. This was all connected, and as time went by, they separated like this. So with the Roman conquest of Britain, the Latin term Britannia was used for the island of Great Britain, the entire island. You've heard the patriotic song, Rule Britannia, you know, Rule Britannia, Britannia rule the waves, right? This is a halfpenny, this personification here of Britannia, this woman with the trident and shield and all. That's who Britannia is. So the Romans conquered most of the island, at least up to Hadrian's Wall in northern England, and we'll talk about that in a minute. And so this became the ancient Roman province of Britannia. That's where Britain comes from. So in the 2nd century, Britannia was personified. She became this goddess, and she became the national personification of Britain. It's this helmeted female warrior, usually holding a trident shield. So for example, this was, we saw her on the coin a minute ago, but this is a painting, a cartoon of Britannia here, mourning the death of Horatio Nelson in 1805 at the victorious Battle of Trafalgar, in a cartoon by someone named James Gilray. So Britannia became the symbol of Britain and this female goddess personification of Britain. So this is a great map. This is Britain in 500 AD, and you know, they have Scotland here as the Picts. And what's really interesting here is look at the size of the land they call Welsh. You know, right now Wales is really only about to there. This is all England and Scotland up here and Ireland here, but this is all labeled Welsh. So in the course of the 500 years after the Roman Empire fell, the Britons of the south and east, so what we call England, they were assimilated, and they were displaced by invading Germanic tribes, and those were the Angles and the Saxons and the Jutes. We know them now as Anglo-Saxons. So when you hear about white Anglo-Saxon Protestants, WASPs, that's where Anglo-Saxon comes from. So at the same time, you've got Gaelic tribes from Ireland invading the north and west. So okay, the Gaelic are as they may say, Gallic tribes are coming there. So they absorbed both the Picts up here and the Britons of northern Britain, and that eventually formed the Kingdom of Scotland in the 9th century. Okay, so the south of Scotland, southeast of Scotland, was colonized by the Angles, and until 1018 at least, a part of the Kingdom of Northumbria. Okay, that's an important word. Ultimately, the population of southeast Britain came to be referred to as the English people, so named after the Angles. So that's where England comes from in English. And England itself now covers 5/8 of the island of Great Britain. So when you see Welsh here, you know, that's the dominant land back then. But now England is 5/8 of the island of Great Britain. So the Germanic speakers would refer to the Britons as Welsh. And, you know, it came to be applied exclusively to the inhabitants of Wales. But you'll see it in names like the name Wallace, or in Cornwall. That's where that Wales and Welsh term comes and is still used today. So there's a lot of fascinating history. I mean, this is the outstanding history: Scotland, Wales, England, Ireland, all that. But we don't have time for that. But let's just say that in the 10th century, all the English kingdoms were unified under one ruler, and it became the Kingdom of England. And that happened when the constituent Kingdom of Northumbria, which we just mentioned, submitted finally in like 959. So then in 1066, England was conquered by the Normans, right? You all remember in school the famous Battle of Hastings in 1066. So under that, Wales came under Anglo-Norman control in like 1282. And so it was officially annexed to England in the 16th century. This is a great map created by Norman Einstein. And so during the Roman Empire's occupation of Scotland, which they called Caledonia, it was physically separated from the rest of the island by the Antonine Wall. Okay, so here's the Antonine Wall. Okay, the Romans several times invaded and occupied this area, but unlike the rest of the island, it remained outside the administration of Roman Britain. Okay, so here's the Firth of Forth. Easy to say, huh? So Firth is just an estuary. And remember, an estuary is just a partially enclosed coastal body, brackish water, brackish meaning it's got salt in it, but not as much as the ocean, with one or more rivers or streams flowing into it and a free connection to the open sea. So this is a firth, or estuary as we call it. So the Firth of Forth, again, not easy to say, and other rivers here combined, the Forth River and others rivers combined to make this Firth of Forth. And for you Genesis fans, a Fun with Maps fact, if you're a fan of the band Genesis, you know the song Firth of Fifth, which of course is a takeoff and a pun on Firth of Forth. And that is not easy to say fast. So here's Hadrian's Wall, here's the Antonine Wall, Irish Sea here, North Sea here, here's the Firth. Okay, so the term Great Britain was first used officially in 1474. They drew up a marriage contract between a daughter of a king of England and a son of James III of Scotland, and in it described this noble isle, call it Great Brittany. So that's how we got Great Britain. So England and Scotland each remained legally separate countries, each had its own parliament. Then 1707, each of their parliaments passed this Act of Union to ratify this document we're looking at here, which is the Treaty of Union, which led to a United Kingdom of all of Great Britain. Okay, so this single kingdom had one parliament. It specified the name of this new all-island state as Great Britain, and it described it as one kingdom and the United Kingdom. So politically, Great Britain refers to the whole of England, Scotland, and Wales, but not Northern Ireland, that's UK. It includes islands such as Isle of Wight and Anglesey, the Scilly, the Hebrides, and the island groups of Orkney and Shetland that are parts of England, Wales, or Scotland, but it does not include the Isle of Man and the Channel Islands. So here's a fun with maps fact. The 3 constituent countries of Great Britain all have patron saints, and let's start with St. George. He's the patron saint of England, and he's represented in their flag. So this is the flag of England. You may be expecting the Union Jack, but we'll get to that in a second. This is England, not the UK. So the flag of England is derived from St. George's Cross, their patron saint. England is about the size of the state of Alabama. It's about 50,000 square miles, but they have a population of close to 55 million. That's 84% of the UK population lives in England, so they're very densely populated. So this is a good map. Of course, London is the capital of England. It's actually the capital of the entire United Kingdom, and that's where the seat of the United Kingdom's government is. There's about 9 million people in England there. So let's just look at this real quick. Here's this North Sea, Scotland up here, the Isle of Man, Northern Ireland, Wales. Remember that other map where Wales came all the way out here, the Welsh. This is all, and familiar names, the Straits of Dover, here's the English Channel, the Isle of Wight, Suffolk, Kent, Cornwall, North Cambridgeshire. What's interesting here, if you look at these, here's Northumberland up here. Remember we talked about that. Look at there, this little section here, Cleveland, spelled C-L-E-V-E-L-A-N-D. So there's Cleveland in England right there. So then when we come to Scotland, the flag of Scotland is also known as St. Andrew's Cross. Scotland has a land size of about 30,000 square miles, so it's pretty close to the size of the state of South Carolina, to give you some perspective. So in this map you can see Scotland. Here's the North Sea again, Northern Ireland, Belfast, the Irish Sea, and here we have, it's the northern third of the island of Great Britain, and it includes like 790 surrounding islands encompassing the major archipelagos of the Shetland Islands and the Orkney Islands, Inner and Outer Hebrides, and Scotland contains the majority of mountainous terrain in the UK. It's distinguished by the topography of Scotland is distinguished by the Highland boundary fault. So there's 2 distinctly different physiographic regions, and I'm sure you've heard of the Scottish Highlands and maybe Lowlands. So the Highlands are to the north and west, and the lowlands to the south and east. Okay, and the more rugged Highlands contain, the majority of Scotland's mountainous terrain, including their highest peak, Ben Nevis. So the lowland areas, though, the more southern part, are home to most of the population. So about 5.5 million people live in Scotland. That's about 8.3% of the total population of the United Kingdom. So Edinburgh here, that's the capital. Glasgow here is the largest city. There's probably about 500,000 people in Edinburgh and maybe about 650,000 in Glasgow. Next would come Aberdeen and then Dundee. So that's Scotland, and like I say, we could do 10 episodes of Fun with Maps just on Scotland, but today we're looking at Great Britain. So this is the flag of Wales, and it's not just a cross like Scotland and England have. This is it's a red dragon on a green and white field. The red dragon is a symbol of Wales. It personifies the fearlessness of the Welsh nation. That is a pretty cool flag. So here's a map of Wales. There's Dublin, Ireland up there. Here's the Bristol Channel. We saw that. This is England out to the east here. Here's Liverpool, home of the Beatles. But this is Wales here. And it's about 8,000 square miles. So that would make it comparable to New Jersey in size. So it's about the size of New Jersey. It's got a population of about 3.1 million, and what it's got, a lot of, look at this, 1,680 miles of coastline, okay? And over here, they have the Cambrian Mountains, just like in Scotland. It's the north and west where all the mountainous regions are. Here's the Cambrian Mountains, the north and central area. And of course the capital down here and largest city is Cardiff, okay? Right across from Bristol and on the Bristol Channel. So there's Cardiff, the capital and largest. You know, the Welsh have a name for themselves. It's Cymru, C-Y-M-R-Y. And the Welsh name for Wales is Cymru, C-Y-M-R-U. And that's descended from a word meaning fellow countrymen. So this is a good map. It gives you some idea of Wales there. England here, Wales there, Cardiff, Bristol Channel, Ireland, home of the Beatles here. It's Cardigan Bay. This is what you might have been expecting as the flag of England. Of course, this is the Union Jack. It's the national flag of the United Kingdom, okay, also known as the Union flag. So it actually incorporates flags of the Kingdom of Scotland, you know, with the cross, and the Ireland. It's got St. Patrick's Cross in there, and the Cross of St. George, which is there to represent both England and Wales. So that's the UK flag. That's the Union Jack. So this is our final map of this episode. This shows the territories that were once part of the British Empire, with the United Kingdom and its current dependencies underlined in red. So this is amazing. At its height, the British Empire was the largest empire in history, and for over a century it was the foremost global power. So by 1913, the British Empire held sway over 412 million people, 23% of the world's population at the time. And by 1920, it covered 24% of the Earth's total land area. So, as a result, its constitutional, legal, linguistic, cultural legacy is widespread all over. I mean, just look at it. So, of course, we've got, you know, Britain and Ireland here, but Canada, that was all part of it. The 13 U.S. colonies of the U.S., that was part of the British Empire. Here we have British Guyana. Here we have a pullout, and you'll see Jamaica and other islands here in the Caribbean, the Antarctic territory down here. Of course, we have Australia and New Zealand and New Guinea, India, of course, Burma, and here when we look at even in the Middle East, Iraq, Oman, Aden, you know, Gibraltar, Menorca. But then here in Africa, we had the Gold Coast and Sierra Leone, Gambia. But this whole strip here of Egypt, Sudan, Cameroon, Uganda, Kenya, Tanzania, Zanzibar, North and South Rhodesia, South Africa, Swaziland, all of this, and the islands here, you know, the Falklands, you remember the war and all this. So the British Empire had an incredible reach in a long run, and at the peak of its power, it was described as the empire in which the sun never sets, because the sun was always shining on some part, at least one of its territories throughout the 24 hours. So now I can't get the song Mull of Kintyre out of my head. It's really a good song, and it's interesting. It didn't do very well in the United States, but over in the UK it became the first single, the largest selling single of all time, and it's ironic or interesting that it replaced She Loves You by the Beatles as the all-time #1 single, until it was replaced by Do They Know It's Christmas, Band-Aid in 1984. But for a song that wasn't a charitable thing like Do They Know It's Christmas, it's the #1 selling single of all time in the UK. And the Genesis fan, I listened to Fifth again. I'm not a real fan of the song, but the guitar solo by Steve Hackett is pretty amazing. So I hope this episode of Fun with Maps clears up some confusion about England, UK, Great Britain, all of that. The range of the British Empire, as we saw, is just incredible, and I hope someday to do separate Fun with Maps episodes on Scotland, England, and Wales, because they deserve it. The maps and the history are just fascinating. So until next time, I'm your host, Dan Hanson, and keep on having fun with maps.